Hello. Well, this is another version of the same video that I uploaded before, but if you are watching this, that video is probably deleted already because I received useful advice in the Isaac Arthur subreddit, and now I'm remaking the video from the concept of sort of microphone and webcam to the microphone, longer video, and stock footage and so on, and images to sort of explain the whatever I'm talking about at the moment with more precision. This video, because it takes like 4 hours or at the minimum 3 or 4 hours to make a script of 20 or 30 minutes, it depends. It is unscripted because I consider it not necessary, in the sense that yes, you will probably notice the difference, but it's probably not that great of a difference, and I don't know how long it will take me to make this kind of videos in total, because I need to sort of review some things, and although not many, but I think that adding a script to the whole process just makes it like twice as time consuming and so on, and I cannot make my dreamed 3 videos a day or something like that. So I don't want to make just one. I want to make several per day and go. So now I'm going to try to remain unscripted if I can. Anyway, so yes, you probably have, well, you did read the title and you are like, stopping volcanic eruptions, is this guy insane? Well, I don't know if I'm insane, because an insane person doesn't know they're insane. Well, let's consider one thing. There's no reason why you cannot, as long as you realize that there's a magma chamber there, and it's a magma chamber that you want to stop from erupting decades into the future. So you sort of need to plan ahead that much as a minimum. But why? And now one would think, why one would expend money on a risky plant which is very close to a volcano, and even if you just say if you avoid a volcanic eruption, you don't normally earn money as public enterprises normally don't earn money for avoiding problems. They get money for fixing problems. So it's more profitable to make an enterprise which fixes damages after a volcanic eruption than an enterprise that avoids volcanic eruption. So normally, as depends, if people get wise enough, they will go like, let's pay for that instead of to fix houses once all of it is covered in lava or something like that. But regardless of that, this idea will be the sort of thing that you think as a public project with private funding too, or something like that. Sort of thinking ahead, and for areas which are either have a very large magma chamber, which could be very dangerous, like a super volcano that can have very bad consequences for the global climate and so on, or is very close to important infrastructure which could be destroyed in a volcanic eruption, or is on a very habitated area or expected to have an important population. Or let's say if there's one house there near that remote volcano, you're not going to expend millions and millions and millions or billions, well, more like billions, in avoiding a future volcanic eruption because it won't pay off. Yes, it's easier to just build another house somewhere and just abandon the area altogether. Anyway, so that's the thing. That's when I say how to avoid volcanic eruptions, but when I was thinking about that, I always thought, how to avoid volcanic eruptions? No, I was thinking about enhanced geothermal energy. Enhanced geothermal energy. Let me explain it first. Is that, and let's explain normal geothermal first. You have water inside of the rock and fractures, so on, and it's fairly down and enough depth, close enough to fairly cold region of the earth crust. So it's maybe hundreds of meters of that, so tens of meters at the top of it. It may have thermal, sort of hydrothermal waters at the top, or it may be very, very deep at kilometers, but you pretty much tap into it and you extract all of that as supercritical fluid or water, and then you normally inject more to avoid it getting dried out and just losing the geothermal resource really fast. That's how normal geothermal works. In general, you could in principle use that to cool down a volcano, because if you recirculate the water faster than it would otherwise, you are already cooling down the surrounding rock, which cools down the volcano. But I'm going to speak in general terms and say that there's pretty much not a big difference between enhanced geothermal and geothermal. In enhanced geothermal, you are going to use fracking, pretty much the same thing that you use to extract natural gas these days, to fracture the rock, and then as you inject all that fluid, which you then will extract somewhere else, that fluid, that or gas, it doesn't matter. It's probably going to be a supercritical. It's not even gas or normal gas or a normal fluid. It's, well, it's closer to a gas, but really dense. So then that's normally going to be water, CO2, maybe nitrogen. I don't know if you will ever use nitrogen for that, but you get the point. Then when you do is, once you have found the magma chamber, you're going to start making all those wells, injection wells and extraction wells. Extraction wells just allow the supercritical fluid to flow out, and injection wells inject more. So to avoid earthquakes, because that's important. That's a risk of geothermal energy. Well, it has two risks in this case. It has the risk of causing an early volcanic eruption. If you go too deep and too fast, you're going to create a lot of fractures, and those fractures may allow for magma to make a way through the rock and eventually cause the volcanic eruption, or immediately, nearly, if it manages to enter and successfully flow through one of those wells, which could happen, but the wells are normally not very wide, but could be, potentially could be wide enough. There could be enough pressure and enough gases in the lava to just flow out. So what you need to do is you go shallow first. You make a very low power plant, like let's think about 100 or 100 megawatts thermal, something like that, and you make it shallow. And over time, as you make sure that you are not causing any sort of remarkable seismic activity or anything dangerous like that, you're going to go deeper. You have your injection wells, which are normally going to be closer to the magma chamber, and your extraction wells are going to be further away because on the surroundings normally. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to start filling up the rock with more fluid than it should and on the surroundings of the plant, because you don't want that fluid to start flowing further and further and further away from the plant, slowly making its way through the cracks in the rock and going far enough to reach a fault. Once it reaches a fault, it starts to sort of act as a lubricant. It acts, it makes it so the fault can move the fracture on the giant fracture on the rock, and then you can cause an earthquake that way. That happened in South Korea. So you need to be careful with that. So that's why you start small and you have your injection wells in the middle normally, as I understand it, and your certain wells around it to sort of avoid too much leakage out of the area. And so the surrounding rock you don't want to contaminate with dangerous non-toxic fluid, but a contaminant anyway, a sort of contaminant dangerous thing. Regardless. Well, so how does it work? Because yeah, it's are small and so on. How? In terms of math. So let's say you have your magma chamber of X kilometers depth, and your rock, it is normally going to transmit about, in terms of energy, about a watt or so per square meter per degree in difference in between one location and the other, right? So if you have a difference of 200 degrees between the lava and the surrounding rock, and it's normally 200, but the next rock is a difference of 10, and then the next rock is 5 or something like that, yes, you're going to have potentially a very important flow, but since the surrounding rock to the magma chamber is also hot, it won't allow for much energy to flow out. But how does it work is that you cool down the rock that's around it, and overall the flow starts to ramp up as the difference goes from, let's say, 10 degrees on a certain area, the gradient, something like that, and you ramp it up to 200 or 100 or something like that. Over time, you end up with a cool down rate of the magma chamber, well, 10 or 20 times faster. And at the same time, you're extracting power from it. And you always do it indirectly. You always do it by allowing the rock to do a job for you. No, you don't risk it. You go slow, because when you go fast, as you cool down the rock too much, even if you are not circulating too much water through it, much fluid, water, whatever, and you're going to cause fractures. Going to fracture, and that is dangerous because the rock is containing that magma and stopping it from flowing out, because that magma is normally less dense than the rest of the rock, because it's probably formed of sort of the same rock, but it's hotter, so it tends to rise like a bubble. So you need to be careful with that, very careful, and that's why it starts small. But anyway, that's factoring into the risk, because the volcanic eruption is a non-guaranteed thing, but very, very, very bad thing, and it pays off if you go little by little. Then, well, that's how it works in terms of transmitting all that power. But how much how much are you cooling down the rock, or how much rock are you cooling down by a given temperature per the thermal power of a plant? So if your plant is 100 megawatts thermical, let's not talk about electrical, because that depends on the efficiency of the whole thing. I'm not about electrical now. You are going to sort of, it depends on, you're going to cool down about 700 kilograms to a ton, it depends on the kind of rock, per every second, and by 100 degrees. That's it. Well, 100 degrees, pretty substantial. So, well, let's say that you need to lower it by 300, so it's not going to be that awesome. But still, when you look at it as all the rock that you're going to cool down in a day, is each day has about 86,000 seconds, if I remember correctly, around that. So 86,000 tons, sort of. Let's say we are talking approximate numbers because we are dealing with sort of counts. This at the end of the day, it all depends on the location and the technology that you are going to use, and the political structure that you have, because some political structures that you might be using, not general structures, but maybe some of the political ideologies involved and so on, and the people that live there, they will have an ideal design or another ideal design, and that will change a lot, and will change a lot with the rock anyway. So it's just approximate, because otherwise we'll be dealing with exact plans for an exact magma chamber from a sound location, and exact political climate going on, because you need the right climate to sort of think about a project decades and decades and decades into the future, and consider the very fact that a volcanic eruption can be technically stopped, which to most people, I think it will be to this moment, well, maybe not for you, but for most people, will be an absurdity. For example, I propose this very thing in Reddit, in energy, in an energy subreddit, let's say, and I got zero. It was zero downvotes. Like, people didn't know about the stuff. Like, they went like, using geothermal energy to cool down magma chambers and so on. It's like, wow, that doesn't even deserve an upvote. Like, wow, yes, it's difficult, but it's green energy and you may earn something from it. So, and it's an interesting concept. So if you consider that, you consider the political climate, yes, so much more complex anyway. Let's go to the concept. So I didn't talk about the other side of it, because this is not only cooling down a volcano, but green energy and so on. So let's look at that part of the planet. Maybe, well, maybe no. If you want to stop a volcano eruption from happening on a location, you either have a ludicrous amount of energy in the magma chamber, so much that it's so dangerous that you want to stop it, or you have population nearby. If you have population nearby, then guess what? It's probably a good idea to have a power plant nearby, right? So you have also the great addition to it that you are going to be selling all the electricity, obviously, because that's probably what is going to pay for the average project. You're going to be selling it, and geothermal is, even though it's expensive because you need to make all those wells. All those wells are made with very high grade sort of steels, that they're not just normal carbon steel. The linings, they're stainless and stuff like that. And maybe you can use aluminum in some of them, maybe in the injection well, because the injection well is quite cool compared with the extraction well. At least once you start injecting a lot of fluid, because the fluid enters cold and sort of keeps the interior cold. But regardless, you have a great advantage here, because when you look at all of green energy sources, let's look at them. You either, which is okay, you either for the most part, you either need to store the energy, like for example, you have wind power, you have solar panels, yeah, you need to store all that energy as in a battery, as potential energy, as rotational energy in the form of a flywheel, in the form of hydrogen, in the form of something like that. You need to store it. So you have an additional cost to it. And you have the problem that while it works well most of the time, once you have a drought, and let's say symbolically, you have a low production time frame, your storage becomes linearly expensive. Normally, it depends if it batteries, something like that, or if it dams, it becomes linearly expensive with how long you want to store it, or it's very inefficient, like hydrogen is, and also difficult to store, expensive to store. So like or compressed nitrogen too. So you have yes, generally the best power source overall is going to end up being, overall, in the terms of all taking into account of the earth, it's going to be solar energy overall, that as technologies improve. Then maybe, depending on the area, maybe wind power to a certain extent. But this geothermal energy has something which is superior to all of them, even superior to nuclear, which is green energy upon pretty much any point of view. If you consider that you're going to store that waste anyway, and the earth is already radioactive, and the nuclear energy contributes to reducing actually the radioactivity of the earth if you're using breeder reactors, because 100 years later or so, the waste is going to be cheaper. It's going to be less radioactive than the uranium you extracted it from, which means that overall the earth can, if you're careful, become less radioactive over the centuries by the use of nuclear energy. If you use it correctly, you don't bomb the plant and you don't melt down too many of them. It's okay if some of them melt down. That's why containment exists, and that's something we'll live with. Like car accidents, we pretty much people have car accidents, or we'll still use cars anyway. But geothermal is even superior to that, in the sense that you, even with nuclear, yes, you can ramp up the power very easily, but you cannot cycle it very easily. And you will need to store all the thermal energy as an additional sort of engineering problem, as heated up molten salt or something like that, to sort of be able to cycle very quickly. So, but geothermal, think about it, you need to, yes, if you want to, and you should keep the pressure constant down there, because you don't want to cause any sort of earthquake or cause more fractures by raising or lowering the pressure and causing stress on the rock, something like that, more stress than you should. But your extraction, the amount of fluid that you extract, you can choose to extract more or less. You cannot do it very, very quickly, because you don't want it to blow up your your well. Because if you stop, if you close that well when it's flowing really fast on the supercritical fluid, you have kilometers of it. The kinetical energy it has as it goes up is quite substantial, and that is going to raise the pressure like suddenly. So you have to take that into account. That it has this very awesome property that you can power it down, and then when you power it up, you allow more fluid to flow out to your turbines and your turbines and so on. You can ramp up power very quickly. It will heat up very quickly. You do have problems, because when it's flowing very slowly, it's going to start losing, well, it's going to lose the same energy to the surrounding rock and so on, the surrounding area, as it flows up the well. But you're extracting less energy from it, so you have a problem. So once you ramp up power, it's going to take a while for the really for all the supercritical fluid to gain kinetical energy and to come up hotter than this colder sort of near static fluid that was slowly ambling up the well. So this is getting a bit too long. I don't know if I miss any relevant point, because some of those points were sort of they reminded me in Reddit that they have sort of forgotten to say them, because I went like, wow, that's pretty obvious. Oh, there's one. This is one which it seemed fairly obvious to me at the moment, but anyway, let's say it. We are talking about to really avoid the average volcanic eruption about hundreds or megawatts of megawatts thermal to gigawatts, and we are talking about to really cool down that lava decades. Not like a decade or two, or maybe 50 or 60 years, depending on a lot of variables, but we are talking like a lot of time. Now, the magma chamber is going to slowly shrink if the walls, the surrounding walls, start freezing and so on. So it's, even if there's a volcanic eruption after 30 years of think about plant operating on a certain area, it's probably going to be not even comparable to how bad it will have been. So at least, even if you had it, it's not that bad. So, yeah, one must should take that into account. But yes, pretty much a public project that you need to look into the future, and it has a big point for more for green energy than only for stopping the volcano itself. So you should consider that as a plus, or maybe as what you want to achieve if you're dealing with something really bad that you want to avoid, like imagine a magma chamber below Tokyo, something like that, or below Seoul. It's like a city which has a country around it, pretty much. A giant city which is several cities, like something like that. Or New York, big cities, something absurd like that. If it's Tokyo, I will believe it because the area already has a lot of volcanoes. We can talk about geothermal energy in Japan in another video, which how would have been if Japan would have developed geothermal energy to its ultimate extent. If they went just geothermal, something like that, like 120 years ago, they decided we are going to use geothermal energy. We don't know how, but we are going to do it. But anyway, that's not a matter for this video. It's getting long. I hope you liked it, even though it sounds scripted. And please leave a comment, a review. Could be useful because I'm starting a channel. And likes to feed the algorithm, and so it shows higher on the overall on the feeds of not only you but probably other people, so on. How did I miss any big point? Because I didn't want that, but yeah, I was pretty complete. If not, I can make another one. Not a problem. Well, so till next time, may technology, a good technology be with you all. I don't know, that sounds like a good phrase. Bye and goodbye.